the possibilities that lie in those four alphabets. Then I'll do the mandatory marketing plug so that I can redeem my ER when I go back to Pune. And I'll briefly talk about stuff that we have learned along the way making beer for the last 2 years or so. As I said, what we do is we make beer. It would be a little simplistic to leave it at that, saying that yes, we do make beer. So I won't say that I make vodka, but we make a category of beers that are called as craft beers. Right now, I can stand here and wax eloquent about how they are handcrafted and how they are made in small batches, and the brewmaster pours his heart into every batch, and so on and so forth. But let's just simply say that if I had to tell you what is the difference between craft beers as a category and industrial beers, and by industrial beers I mean pretty much the swill that you buy if you walk up to a liquor shop. Okay. So if I have to crisply summarize this difference in one slide, it would be this. So one is a product of human inspiration, and other is a product of process, broadly. Okay, so this is crisply the difference between what we try to do. I'm not saying that we don't end up making this sometimes. We do. But what we do is we don't sell it. We train it. The other way is sell it in the market. Okay, beer basics. There are white wines and red wines. Right? Likewise, there are ales and there are lagers. The difference between these two is that the way in which they are made, not the ingredients. No, the ingredients in both the styles are pretty much common. It is the way in which the beer is fermented that determines whether a beer is an ale or a lager. Ales are made using a kind of yeast that is extremely aggressive and works at slightly higher fermentation temperatures. The kind of beers this yeast makes are very fruity, whole-bodied, and very delicious beers. Right? So very complex, very delicious beers. Those are typically ales. Lagers are a relatively more modern invention, so to speak. This as a style was developed in the Czech Republic, south-eastern side, and the Bavarian region of Germany. That general region is where the style originates from. These beers, they use a yeast that is a very fascinating story. I'll talk about it when I move to the presentation. But these beers are very clean, crisp. They are exactly the kind of beers you want to drink in summer. So between these two styles, so if these are two broad families of beers, ales and lagers, there are about 2,500 different styles of beers that can be commercially made. You want to take a guess how many are made in India today out of those 2,500? That is commonly available on the liquor shop. One. So for, I think the Indian beer industry, the modern beer industry post 1947 is about 60 years old, and it has made one beer in those 60 years. All of them put together. How many have we made in the last 24 months? A small company that, even if Vijay Mallya persists, that will be equivalent to our capacity over here. So how many styles do you think we have made in the last 1 year?
25.
25. Thank you. Thank you.
Free beer?
Anytime.
Oh, I didn't know that, by the way. It was a guess.
All of you guys would not be even be half a tank. So yeah, sure. Okay, moving on. So let's for a minute assume that I am teaching beer basics. Okay, we understood what are the broad classification of beer. There are ales, lagers. Ales are fruitier, heartier, more interesting, more complex. Lagers are typically your college buddies whom you want to just, when you're in the mood to just have a beer, that is when you have a lager. When you're in the mood to have something that's a little more refined, when you're feeling a little snooty, every now and then, that is when you have an ale. Moving on, when you get a glass of beer in front of you, hopefully this is what you should be observing. The first thing that indicates good beer is the way it is poured, and does it give a head? Yeah. This is really no other way to say this now. Forget the scientific nonsense. You need to understand that great beers have very nice, thick, foamy, stable heads. The another thing that the head does is that, beer has all these interesting flavors. Good beers have all these interesting flavors and aromas. And these are volatile compounds. The head releases those volatile compounds in your nose. Now that's an image you don't want to interpret in any other way except for beer. Moving forward, the second thing that you might want, the second aspect you might want to evaluate is the beer's appearance. So anything from what a kingfisher is, from what a kingfisher is, down to what a stout is, and everything in between, literally, is what a beer can look like. So a beer doesn't look just pale, golden, and sparkling. It can look anything from 4 to 139. Don't ask me what EBC is, it just says EBC. And then, so you move beyond the way it looks, and then you take a sip of, a nice hearty sip of a good beer in your mouth. These are all the things that are possible on your palate. You know Dharmesh? Anybody? Yeah. There is a beautiful way in which he describes a good beer. He says that a good beer is a party in your mouth, right? So this is what a party in your mouth looks like. Okay? The complexity, oh, it's beautiful. When you have a good beer, it's brilliant. Okay, moving forward, what is it made from? It's a little stupid to say that my beers are organic, because all beers are organic. Okay, so if a beer marketer is telling you that his beers are organic, please ask him to go and shove his head in a dark place, because that is where he's talking out of. It's made from 4 basic ingredients, all of which are natural. So there is malt. Malt is nothing but you take any grain, you germinate it, and then you roast it. You do all this because there are certain enzymes in every grain that, when this process is done, convert starches into sugars. So grain has starch. Making alcohol requires that starch to be converted into sugar, so that the sugar is fermented into alcohol and carbon dioxide. Very basic. I will not talk more science in this. So the malt is basically the grain that produces starches that produce sugar for fermentation. Water is water. Hops are, these are flowers of wine that grows only above a certain latitude. So these hops are typically grown in Western Europe, not Western Europe, Czechoslovakia, Bavaria. These are good big hop growing regions. Even America is a huge hop growing region. Yeast is like the conductor in an orchestra. So what yeast does is actually takes all these ingredients and makes it into a beer. So these are the 4 basic ingredients that go into making beer. Malt, which is made from grains. Any grain you can imagine can be made into a beer. Barley, it just so happens that 80% of the beer in this world is made, no more than that, 85-90% of the beer in this world is made using barley. But that is not the only grain. We have made a beer from rye about 8 months back. Beautiful beer. We made a beer. No, Natsumi, the test batch failed spectacularly. I mean, it was so bitter, it was not even funny.
Mango, right?
What's that? No, Basri. You guys have heard of Basri? This is a pearl millet, dark, small grain that is used to make bhakri. Yeah. So, I think the month before last, we made a batch, a 1,000-liter batch using Basri. Think of a grain that has the right amount of starch in it and you can make beer out of it. That's the basic one. Hops, it has a botanical name that I cannot pronounce. The thing that I do know about this is that it comes from the same family as cannabis, and that excites me. So, I can say that I have a dozen of cannabis, I put a dozen of cannabis in my beer. 2 kinds of hops, one that give bittering, because you need to balance out the sweetness of the malt in the beer, and the others that give aroma. When you make the beer, the hops that impart bitterness are added early to the manufacturing process. The hops that impart aroma are added later. I'll talk more about it. The typical kind of, so there are two things that a hop does. Okay, first, it balances the sweetness and it imparts a nice punchy bitterness to the beer. And second, it imparts some beautiful aromas. My favorite is the Saaz hop that has this brilliant, piney, citrusy nose. If any one of you ever gets a chance to drink a beer called as Pilsner Urquell, don't let that chance go. You will, when I say that hop character, that is the beer that will give you the best example of what I just said. Pilsner Urquell. It means Pilsner from the source. It is the first lager beer that was ever made in the world. Still 400 years old brand. They still use the same place to make exactly the same beer. 400 years. Yeast to draw. So as I said, there are top fermenting yeast and there are bottom fermenting yeast. So the top fermenting yeast is this guy called as Saccharomyces cerevisiae, and this one is the bottom fermenting one, Saccharomyces Carlsberg. It's not if you see Carlsberg in there, it's not because it's some random product placement. This yeast was quite literally invented by Carlsberg. Bottom fermenting yeast was invented. Okay, I want you guys, whenever you're out of this and I'm done talking my shit, go and search for Louis Pasteur beer yeast. You will be surprised to know that 80% of Louis Pasteur's work on microorganisms was commissioned by the owner of Carlsberg. Why? Because he was trying. You are talking about a time wherein people did not even know that yeast exists, right? So how beer was made, people thought that some fairy used to come and beat their pond, and suddenly there is fermentation happening. Okay. So somewhere this guy, okay. So, okay. Okay, moving on. Regional variations. So it started with 2 strains of yeast, and every brewer then cultivated their own strains, and now we are in a place where there are quite literally thousands and thousands of strains of brewing yeast that are available. I think at our brewery, we at any point in time, we have about 50 strains of yeast with us. So, followed. Okay, this is how beer is made. Okay, so you take the malt. Malt, as I said, is nothing but grain that has been germinated and roasted. You mill it. The idea of milling is to break the hull so that when you mix it with water and take it to, let's say, about 78 degrees Celsius, the starch gets converted into sugars that will be used by the yeast. After mashing, you move it to lautering, wherein, if you guys have made chai at home, so you put the chai in water, boil it, and then you strain it. So the straining bit is what is done there. So you mix grain with water, you take it to about 78 degrees Celsius so that the starches are converted into sugar. Then you move it to the lautering process, which is effectively channa. So you take all that spent grain out and you take that sweet malty water into boiling, where you add hops to it so that the sweetness is balanced by bitterness. Cool it down, move it to fermenting, pitch yeast. This is where the sugars are converted into alcohol. Filter, package and dispense. I'll just talk briefly about a couple of important things here. I'll talk a little bit about lautering, I'll talk a little bit about fermentation, because these are a couple of important steps here. So milling is basically preparing the grain for making beer. So as I said, malt is to beer what grapes are to wine making. So grapes provide the fermentable sugars that the yeast converts into alcohol in the case of wine. In the case of beer, it's a little more complicated. You start with the grain, and as I said, it converts into sugars later. So the brewmaster decides. So it's literally like a chef sitting down and preparing the recipe, saying that, okay, I want to make a dish based on chicken that looks like this, that tastes like this, and that is served like this. So that is how an idea of a beer is conceptualized in a brewmaster's head. So this whole thing I talk about, these beers are product of human inspiration. It's not far from reality, because this guy literally sits down and says, okay, now this is how I believe the Indian consumer is reacting to these beers that we are making. So the maltiness has to be a little low. maybe it can be a little more aromatic on the nose, but not more. And definitely it cannot be more bitter than XYZ IPA. That is the kind of brief he sets with. He translates that into a grain bill. So he knows that he has how many between, so these are nothing but grains, okay? These are different kinds of grains roasted to different degrees using different processes. And each of them brings a unique character to the beer if a beer is made from it. So what the brewmaster does is that he takes a combination of these grains, makes a hypothesis on what kind of characteristics it will translate into the product, takes that grain mill, mills it and prepares it. So basically, RTP chutney hai, you know. Lot. Mashing is where the starch is converted into sugar. So you take that milk grain, you mix it with water, you hold it at about 78 degrees Celsius for about anywhere between 60 to 90 minutes. And then you move it to the laundering phase, which, as I said, is like the same. It does the same thing that you do when you are chanoing your cup of tea. Yes, that was a bad word. Boiling, this is where hops are added. As I said, aromatic hops that impart aroma are added later in the boil. Hops that impart bitterness are added early in the boil. It also sterilizes the water. This is boring. Yes, this is the fun here. So, you have a tank full of sweet malty liquid with a hint of bitterness in it. Okay, is that beer? No, it's not beer. That needs to be beer. So you take those, one of the two guys that I spoke about, one of the top fermenting yeast or the bottom fermenting yeast, you pitch it in the tank and then you create a blanket of carbon dioxide on the top of it. Why? Because this process is an anaerobic process. So it should, during fermentation, if you expose that young beer to sunlight or to air, it spoils. Again, because air is not sterile. The air that I'm breathing around me is not sterile. It has microorganisms. And what yeast is a microorganism, right? So if the yeast can ferment sugar, any other microorganism can do the same. So if I do not want any off flavors, which is why I create a packet of carbon dioxide on the top, the yeast does its job. It effectively eats the sugar and, well, putting it politely, metabolizes it into carbon dioxide and alcohol. The two kinds of sugars that the non-fermentable sugars are the ones that the yeast cannot ferment, so they remain in the beer. Typically, high gravity beers, anyone of you had a Kingfisher Strong here?
Yep.
Okay. When you're drinking it, does it leave a slightly molassy kind of a feel in your mouth? Those are the residual sugars. Okay, so typically the problem with high gravity beers is that high gravity as in high alcohol beers, that there is a lot of residual sugars which create this molassy alcoholic taste in your mouth. So that's fermentation. Then from there you move the beer to aging and conditioning and maturing it. Even though the fermentation pretty much takes care of making the base of beer, there are still a lot of off flavors in a young beer. That's because during the fermentation, the yeast creates some organic compounds that create off taste. So you hold it at much lower temperatures for about 2 to 3 weeks, so that all those undesirable compounds that are there that create off flavors in the beer are broken down into simpler compounds, and the beer becomes more smooth and rounder in flavor. That's. Any quick questions on how beer is made? Yeah.
I have a question. You talked about hops being from a particular land.
Yeah.
How common are they to find in India? I've heard
Someone tried to grow them in Himachal, and we were able to track that guy down. We had a chat with him. It was a bit of a disaster for him. So he tried 1 year and then it didn't work out. So, as of now, there is no one doing hops. So,
it's imported or used?
It's imported. All of it is imported. Draft is a format of serving, right? So the beer can be served in a bottle, beer can be served in a can, or beer can be served through a keg on tap. So if a beer is served through a keg on tap, it is called as draft. So it's not a kind of beer, it is the way it is served.
I have heard that draft beers are normally not pasteurized.
True. That's because when you are packaging that beer in a keg, how do you pasteurize a bottle of beer? You fill it up, right? You heat it, and then you slowly cool it down. Now you can't do it with a 50-liter keg. So which is why beers that are served on draft are unpasteurized, and they typically, the way the normal bars work, when a keg is tapped, you have to finish in about 24 hours. Because they don't store it. It's just lying on the floor.
There is a lot of talk often that there is a lot of chlorine in beers.
Chlorine, what? Something that's there in, okay, a brewer will not put chlorine in there. But if it's there in water, then, then the brewer's job is to have a robust water treatment system in place to remove, to prepare the water for it. Because I just can't open a tap and make beer from it. So I have to prepare, if I have to take a 1,000-liter batch, I have to spend a day preparing that 1,000 liters of water for brewing. Because first you RO it, then depending on the style of beer you're making, you have to add salts and other compounds to it to make it ready.
So basically this is fermentation of malt. And how does, like, if I understand right, beer and whiskey both come out of fermentation of malt. So what's the difference?
Okay. They're cousins, beer and whiskey. Okay, so if I take any beer in large amount, I do pot distillation of that beer. And then what comes out of the pot distillation, I age in barrels, oak or whatever catches your fancy. That becomes whiskey. So the raw material is the same. It's just that at X stage, if I mature and bottle it, it becomes beer. And if I take it forward and I distill it and I age it, it becomes whiskey.
The percentage of alcohol in the beer is dependent
On the amount of grain I use to make it. Because more grain means more starch, means more sugar, means more alcohol.
how much yeast is used. The other day I saw the Heineken plant when they showed that only a small bottle of yeast is used for making large amounts of beer. So because in Heineken plant,
Okay, what you saw was a vial of the mother culture.
okay.
That mother culture is propagated in tanks that are motherfucking big, like 2,000 liters. And then you take huge amounts of yeast in buckets from those tanks and pour into tanks that are roughly the size of the centimeters per feet. So that is how, so don't worry. With this, I don't think I can even make a 10-liter batch.
Okay. And have you been to Oktoberfest or something like that?
We are having, marketing plug is coming.
What's the why is most of the times when I go to a restaurant and I have a picture, I go, it doesn't taste the same. Even a Foster's picture won't taste the same as the bottle.
If it tastes good, it is because it is fresh. Okay, guys, here's the thing. Whiskey ages, wine ages, beer has to be had fresh. It's a farm product. It's like milk. Okay, so if it tastes good, it is because it is fresh. If it tastes bad, that's because the restaurant is a douchebag who doesn't know how to serve that. Okay, moving on. Okay, this is cliches. What we have learned in the last 24 months of making beer, besides it's not good to drink too much of it on a weekday. Being an entrepreneur, it's a lifestyle choice, and I mean this in the deepest possible way. Right? The fundamental idea of delayed gratification, the thesis that any entrepreneur works with, is a lifestyle choice. Okay? So if you want to be one, just make sure that you will be living a pretty nanga lifestyle for a long time.
How long does it take to make a batch of beer?
Depending on whether it's an ale or a lager, anywhere between 2.5 to 4 weeks before it goes on tap. Emotional durability, by that I mean you will fail multiple times in ways you cannot imagine. Just make the right product hypothesis and stick to it. Okay? Because see, the thing is this: how can you not fail? Right? It's a little ridiculous just thinking that you cannot fail. So when I say emotional durability, it's a euphemism for shamelessness. that you should be okay failing multiple times and telling people that you have failed, because that is something that you will be doing a lot. Ambiguity is your friend, and black swans is Tarun, right? The guy who was talking about toolkit.
Yeah, tricky.
Yeah, so it is broadly in that area. The things that larger organizations cannot handle are things that actually give you the strength of a small company. What do I mean by this? Ambiguity is your friend. In the, Tarun was saying, right, my job in my company is to be the guy who sends, I'm the market, okay? There is no polite way to say that. In the last 4 years, Facebook has completely rewritten the playbook of my trade, okay? And this, as an idea, is something that even large marketers haven't come to grips with. It's ambiguous. It is a little out there. Nobody knows what works. Nobody knows how to measure success. Nobody knows, for the love of God, how to correlate X to Y business actually being generated on the ground. Okay? This ambiguity gives me, as a small company who has a better understanding of this medium, to get my message out far more effectively and far more cheaply than I could ever hope to do. Let's say 7 years back. Had I started this, and I'm honest, had I started this business 7, 8 years back, I would have failed spectacularly at it. Why? Because there was no way on earth I could have got, the message is simple, right? The message is good beer. It's very simple. But as a small company, can I spend 50 lakh rupees on media to get that message out? Forget the legal ramifications. I can't. Okay? So when I say ambiguity is your friend, is this, that as a small company, you have the flexibility to adapt to even large changes that sweep larger organizations. You don't die. Black Swans, again the same theory. You guys should read that book. It's by this guy called Nicholas Nassim Taleb. 2 books he has written, The Black Swan and Fooled by Randomness. His hobby horse is that past cannot accurately predict the future. Right? Some random events happen that you cannot foresee, and that which in hindsight are obvious. You know, it's really possible as a young startup to make them work in your favor, right? Your ability to change the direction of a company radically when you are a 2-year-old company is far easier than doing it when you're a 10-year-old company. Okay? So if something terrible happens, make something out of it. Okay? I'll be very honest. When we started out writing the business plan, we wanted to be a brew pub. We said that we will make the beer and we will fucking handle the kitchen, and we will do the service, and we will be doing everything, right? What happened? We could not raise money to do that. Why? Because people said that you're fucking idiots. I mean, the only thing you have done in restaurants is eat, and you're coming here and telling me that you run a restaurant successfully. Yeah, sure, you can. You have a business partner who's a brewmaster and who has been trained to do this. So if you come and tell me that you're a beer company, sure, I might invest in you. So what did we do? Change the business plan. We said, okay, fine, we are not a brew pub, we are a brewery and we partner with restaurants. Do you think, if you ask me that, will this be my going business model? I'm pretty darn sure I'll be standing here, if at all you guys call me after what happened today. I'll be standing here singing some other song. That, you know, that I was a brewery who was partnering with restaurants. Now I'm something entirely else. Ask this question to me 5 years from now and I will be able to give you a definite answer on what I will be doing for the next 3 years. For the first 5 years, no clue. Whether I'll be making beer for the next 2 years, at least, for sure. Yeah, so the one thing that I will continue doing as a company is make beer. Everything else can change, no problem. So that's the little bit. Color of money does matter. Yeah, be careful about who invests in your company.
Can you share a little more about the whole thing when Smokies took over? Many people didn't like it. Suddenly started selling Heineken and Kingfisher.
They still sell Heineken.
Yeah, and suddenly bouncers came and you had to buy shoes.
Okay. And most importantly, if you're a product company and you're not profoundly dissatisfied with your product, you're doing something wrong. Okay? Even if your product is absolutely the best in class, and as a product owner, if you're not dissatisfied with it, you're doing something wrong. This is just some basic yarn. Yeah, done. Marketing plug, that's my website, dulari.in. That's my